Hi children, today I am going to start lesson number 20 and the title of the lesson is Post-War World and India. Post-War World and India. This is the last lesson for this academic year. Now in this lesson we are going to learn about the changes that took place in the whole world and also in particular in India after the Second World War. What all changes took place in India and also in the whole world we are going to learn in this lesson. And also about new organizations that were set up after the Second World War, wars that were fought between countries, and also India's relations with its neighboring countries like with China, Pakistan and Bangladesh and even Sri Lanka. What type of relationships are being maintained by our country. Now let us see what were the after effects of World War II. And due to the Second World War, as you know, the Second World War was fought from 1939 to 1945. And the worst affected were, due to this Second World War, the worst affected countries were USSR, Poland and Yugoslavia. These three countries, they lost 20% of their population in the war. And many of the factories, cities, mines were also destroyed in these cities. So, economically also these countries faced great losses. And comparatively, USA suffered no loss or less losses as the war was not fought on its territories. USA did not face so much of devastation because no war was fought on the territories of USA actually. It was out of the theater of wars. So it did not suffer so much of loss as the other countries did. And in fact, USA was benefited by the Second World War as industries and agriculture also could be well developed as it was far away from the theaters of war. And so this helped USA come out of the effects of Great Depression also. As you know, Great Depression occurred in 1929 to 39 it continued, and all the countries were affected due to this Great Depression except Russia. And this USA could come out of the effects of this Great Depression during the Second World War period because it could develop agriculture and industries also. And thus, during Second World War, USA could ensure full employment to the people and more productivity. And that is why Harry Truman, he was the president of USA at the time of Second World War. And he remarked, "We have emerged from this war the most powerful nation in the world, and the most powerful nation perhaps in all history." That means USA emerged as the most powerful country in the world and also most powerful country in the whole world history. Now all the countries which were devastated by the war rebuilt their economies. After the Second World War, these countries which were devastated, they started rebuilding their economies. And some new processes took place in the world. And these new processes were establishment of UNO and Cold War between USA and USSR and decolonization. These were the three processes that took place in the world. First, establishment of UNO. As you know, as the peace and economies of all the countries were disturbed and they were devastated, there was an urgent need to set up an international organization for the establishment of peace between the countries and also to prevent such wars in future. So with that aim, UNO was established on 24th October 1945 and it finally led to the formation of UNO. And colonial powers like Britain, France also faced much loss after the war and their economies were also devastated. So they were busy rebuilding their economies and could not concentrate on the colonies. They colonized some of the countries in Africa and Asia, but they could not concentrate on those colonies, on the administration of those colonies, because now they were busy rebuilding their economies after the Second World War. So they had to give freedom to the colonies like India, Indonesia, etc. All these countries, they got freedom after the Second World War only. And by the time these colonized countries became independent from colonial powers, the world was torn into two power blocks. And the Western bloc, it was headed by USA. It was also called as capitalistic bloc. And the Eastern bloc was headed by USSR and it was called socialistic bloc. And a type of war started between these two blocs. It was not actually any war fought, real war fighting, but all the countries like India, Indonesia, Egypt, Libya, Yugoslavia, which got independence from colonial rule, they were pressurized by USA and USSR. I told you the world got divided into two power blocks, USA and USSR. Now these two countries were trying to become the supreme power in the world. And to become supreme power, they wanted more and more newly independent countries to come and join their blocks. So they were insisting on newly independent countries to come and join their blocks. And if more number of countries join a particular bloc, if they join USA will become more powerful and strong. And if they join USSR will be the number one country in the world. So they were insisting on these newly independent countries to come and join their bloc, rather than following their own path of development. Because any independent country which gets independence after many years, it wants to follow its own path for the development. But without that, these USA and USSR, they insisted on these newly independent countries that without following their own path of development, they should come and join their bloc. And the third one is decolonization. The third process is decolonization. Decolonization means after the Second World War, as I told you, many of the European countries, they were busy rebuilding their economies. So they gave freedom to their colonies. And the colonial power came to an end. Colonial rule came to an end. And all the countries which were colonized by the European countries, they got freedom from colonial rule. That is called decolonization. A process of getting independence from colonial rule is called decolonization. Now, UNO, United Nations Organization. I told you it was formed. It was an international organization which was established after the Second World War with the initiative of superpowers like UK, France, USA, USSR, China. UNO was established on 24th October 1945. And it was established with mainly two objectives. The first one was to establish peace in the world countries and human development. And the second one was eradication of poverty and hunger for all the people in the world. And at the same time, the UNO recognized the autonomy of the nations also. And it also promised the nations that if it will not interfere in their internal affairs. Only if there is serious violation of human rights in any country or any threat to world peace, then only it will interfere. And under such conditions only the UNO will interfere and solve the problems peacefully. So it was a promise made by UNO that it will not interfere in their internal affairs. Only if there is any violation of human rights in any country or there is a threat to world peace, then only it will interfere and it will solve the problems peacefully. And at the time of its establishment, UNO had 54 member countries. And today, that is as in 2014, there are 193 countries as members in UNO. And the UNO works through 6 organs. What are these 6 organs? Already I have discussed and I have given you the running notes also in 13th lesson, history 13th lesson, if you remember well. Anyway, I am repeating once again. General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, Trusteeship Council, International Court of Justice and the Secretariat. These are the 6 organs through which the UNO functions. General Assembly, it is a policy making body and it takes all the policy decisions of the UNO. And it also approves the budget of the UNO. And the second one is Security Council. Security Council, its main function is to maintain peace and security in all the countries. And there are 5 permanent members in this Security Council. Remember, this is the very important part of the lesson. There are 5 permanent members in Security Council: China, France, UK, USSR, USA. These are the 5 permanent members in Security Council, and these 5 permanent members are given a special power called veto power. What is this veto power? Any decision taken by the UNO can be vetoed by any of these 5 permanent members. That means, if it is not acceptable to a particular country, suppose the UNO takes a decision, and if this decision is not acceptable to any particular country in these 5 permanent members, it can make the decision invalid by using veto power. And if any of the 5 countries also says no, the decision will not be taken by the UNO and it cannot be implemented. Now I hope you understood what is veto power. It is very important part, veto power. Many times it has been given for 1 mark or 2 marks. The 5 permanent members in Security Council, they are given a special power. It is called veto power. What is this veto power? Any decision taken by the UNO can be made invalid by using this veto power by any of the 5 members. If a decision taken by the UNO is not acceptable or not favorable to their country, immediately the country can make it invalid by using its veto power. And such decisions will not be implemented or taken by the UNO. And these superpowers, as they are involved in many conflicts, use their veto power to block any of the decision of the UNO. And sometimes even they have used this veto power to force the UNO to bend to their dictates. The UNO had to function as these 5 members directed it sometimes. And the UNO is doing commendable work in the fields of health, education, cultural exchange, etc. But it is not so successful in preventing wars. How does the UNO carry out its day-to-day functions? There are some agencies which are working under the UNO, like WHO, ILO, WTO, all these are agencies of UNO. World Health Organization, International Labour Organization, UNESCO, UNICEF, all these agencies, they work for UNO. Now, you can see in this picture, this is the emblem of UNO, and the headquarters of UNO are at New York. And the next one is 2 camps and the Cold War. Now let us see Cold War, what is this Cold War and why it occurred. As you know, after the Second World War, the world got divided into 2 power blocks, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. Western power bloc, it was capitalistic bloc and it was headed by USA. And it promoted the ideas of multi-party democracy and private capitalistic controlled process of government. That means everything was under the control of capitalists in USA. And it promoted multi-party democracy. And whereas Eastern Bloc was socialist bloc and it was headed by USSR. And USSR promoted the ideas of equality. You know, socialism means equality of all the people. Already we learned the differences between capitalism and socialism. Under socialism, everything is owned by the government. So, it promotes equality. USSR, because it is socialistic bloc, it promoted the ideas of equality and state-controlled development. Everything will be under the control of government. And thus, it promotes equality of all the people. So, these 2 blocs and all the Eastern European countries like Poland, Hungary and Eastern Germany, they joined the Eastern Bloc. And even China and Vietnam, which were newly independent, they also joined the Eastern Bloc because they are also communist countries. They joined the USSR bloc. And the Western European countries like Britain, France, Spain, etc., they joined the Western Bloc. And these 2 power blocs, USA and USSR, they competed with each other for bringing all the intermediate countries into their blocs. That means whatever countries got independence after the Second World War, newly independent countries, they were forced to join their bloc by USA and USSR. And for more than 45 years after the Second World War, a strange war was fought between USA and USSR, and this war was named as Cold War. What is this Cold War? No war was fought between these 2 countries using any weapons or on the battlefield. It was a war in which USA and USSR did not physically attack each other, but they fought behind closed doors through propaganda and words. And it is called Cold War because there is no real fighting which took place between the 2 countries. USA and USSR, they did not fight any real war. And because there was a tension of war, tension of fear between these 2 blocs, and thus tension was named as Cold War. And this effect of Cold War can be seen in each and every incident that took place in the world countries between 1945 and 1991. That means wherever any incident or event took place in any country, immediately this USA and USSR, they used to rush to that country, and then they used to support one side. USA used to support one side and the USSR on the other side. That means they used to become rivals in that country also. In each and every incident, they competed like that. And this Cold War was not just a propaganda war. We cannot say that real fighting did not take place. The real fighting did not take place between USA and USSR. But even then, nearly 20 million people lost their lives due to this Cold War. And all those who were killed due to this Cold War, they belong to the third world countries. What are these third world countries? Third world countries means the newly independent countries who did not join either of the blocs. That means they did not join the Western Bloc or the Eastern Bloc, but they remained neutral in international politics. Like Korea, Vietnam, India, Angola, Afghanistan, all these are third world countries. So what are third world countries? The newly independent countries which did not join either of the blocs but remained neutral in international politics. And you have to give one or two examples if it is given for 1 mark question. Now, 3 main tactics were used by these USA and USSR during Cold War period. Cold War period was from 1945 to 1991, and during this 45 years they used 3 tactics. Those were proxy wars and military alliances and arms race. Now let us see what are they one by one. First one is proxy war. Proxy war means they did not directly fight with each other. As I told you just now, wherever any incident took place in any country, immediately USA supported one side and the USSR supported the other side. Like that they fought with each other indirectly, and that is called as proxy war. Now let us see what happened in this proxy war. The then US President Harry Truman, he was the President of USA at the time of Second World War, and he extended his support for the anti-communist forces in Turkey and Greece, because USA, it is an anti-communist country, it is against communism. Communist country is Russia, and USA is against communist, so it is anti-communist country. Because of that, USA extended support to anti-communist forces in Turkey and Greece in 1947. And Congo, which was an African country, it was a colony of Belgium, and it got independence from colonial rule in 1960. But in 1960 itself, communist government was established in Congo. But its leader, Patrice Lumumba, he was killed in 1961. In 1960, Congo got independence and communist form of government was formed with Lumumba as its leader, and immediately in 1961 he was killed by US spy agency called CIA. He was killed. Angola, it is also an African country, and it was colonized by Portugal. And Angola became independent from Portugal in November 1975. And in Angola also communist government was established with the help of USSR and Cuba. And in Latin America, Fidel Castro, you might be knowing this Fidel Castro because recently he passed away, Fidel Castro. It was shown on TV also. In Latin America, Fidel Castro, he led a revolution against a government which was supported by America. And he wanted to build communist government, just like USSR. And this inspired a large number of countries in Latin America. I hope you remember Latin America. Latin America means Mexico, Central America, and the whole of South America together, they are called as Latin America. And most of the countries in Latin America, they got inspired with Fidel Castro, and they too also wanted to establish communist governments in their countries. So, when they started their revolutions for similar transformation, one of their popular leaders, Che Guevara, he was killed. And it is not known who killed him, but probably he was also killed by US spy agencies only. Like that. And even in Chile, a revolution was led by S. And that was also destroyed by US-backed army generals. A government was established by socialists like the government of Chile led by S. That means communist form of government was established in Chile also, which was led by Allende. But this was also destroyed by the US supported army generals. Now, the USSR tried to expand its sphere of influence, and for that, what USSR did in 1971, USSR invaded Afghanistan to establish communist form of government in Afghanistan also. And immediately, the USA, it provided armed support to Afghan rebels. There were some rebel groups in Afghanistan. To them, USA supplied arms to fight with USSR. Are you understanding? It is just like a proxy war. I just now explained you. Whenever an incident takes place in another country, both these countries, USA supports one side and USSR supports another side. So because USSR wanted to establish communist government in Afghanistan, immediately USA extended its support to rebels group in Afghanistan by supplying them weapons to fight with USSR. And these rebel groups, Afghan rebels, they were religious extremes. They were called as Talibans. You might have heard the name Talibans. And a prolonged civil war took place between USSR and Afghanistan, these rebel groups also. And finally, USSR decided to leave Afghanistan in 1985, and it left in 1985. Immediately, when USSR left Afghanistan, Afghanistan fell to the control of religious extremists. These religious extremists, Taliban, took over the control of Afghanistan. In 1985, when USSR left Afghanistan, immediately Taliban took over the control of Afghanistan. And now these Taliban, who took the support of USA, now they turned against USA. Once USSR left Afghanistan, Taliban turned against USA. And in all these we can see that theatre of warfare or maybe destruction, it was only third world countries. Afghanistan, it is a third world country. So, in all these countries, the third world countries were only destroyed and they lost their lives. Now, second one is military alliances. These USA and USSR, they formed into some military alliances, and just to protect themselves from the other power bloc, they formed into military alliances. For example, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it was formed in 1949 by USA bloc. The Western bloc formed into North Atlantic Treaty Organization, comprising of 13 nations. It formed into NATO. NATO was formed in 1949. And as a counter move to this NATO, immediately the Eastern bloc, that is Communist bloc, they made a similar alliance and they signed Warsaw Pact. So what is counter move to NATO? NATO was formed by Western bloc in 1949. And to counter this, Warsaw Pact was signed by the communist countries. Warsaw, it is the capital of Poland, and in Warsaw it was signed, so this is known as Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact is a counter move to NATO. In addition to this, USA also established some other alliances like CETO, CENTO. CETO means Southeast Asian Treaty Organization and CENTO means Central Treaty Organization. Now, let us see how these military alliances help the superpowers. These military alliances help superpowers in many ways. First of all, they help the superpowers to get vital resources like oil and minerals from these countries with which they made alliances. Suppose 13 countries are there in NATO. If they are forming into an alliance, that means the superpowers, they can take oil resources or mineral resources from these countries wherever they are available. So even in these countries served as markets for their products. Suppose USA is producing some products. It can sell its products in these 13 countries. In all these 13 countries, it can sell its products. And also it can safely invest its capital in these countries. So these alliances, military alliances, help the superpowers to get vital resources like oil and minerals from these countries, supplied markets for their products, and also provided places to safely invest their capital. And also military bases. These alliances provided military bases to launch their military troops and weapons. Without spending a single pie, they could station their military troops and weapons in these countries and to spread their ideology. In all these countries, they could spread their ideology. Capitalism is the ideology of USA, communism is the ideology of USSR. So they could spread their ideology in these countries easily. And they could gain economic support also whenever needed. To pay huge military expenses and all, they could gain economic support from these countries. So in these ways, the military alliances help the superpowers. It is very, very important part of the lesson. Now, arms and space race. Both the USSR and USA, they spent huge amounts of money to conduct research into weapons and also build arsenal. That means they competed in arms race. These were the two main contenders in the arms race, USA and USSR, and they increased their nuclear weapons. And this competition also extended to space between USA and USSR. For example, USSR put the first satellite Sputnik and the first human being Yuri Gagarin in space. And immediately USA sent Neil Armstrong and others to the moon in 1969. So like that, this competition in arms race also extended to space and it became a space race. Now, non-aligned movement. In 1950s, the world was getting increasingly militarized and divided into two camps. We already learnt about it. The world got divided between two power blocks, that is Western Bloc and Eastern Bloc. And the newly independent countries, they were insisted to join either of the blocks. So, the world became bipolar world. It was divided into two power blocks, so it was bipolar world. And all the newly independent countries, they have to join either this block or that block. And instead of doing that, our former Prime Minister, our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, he pioneered a new program. He chose a new path without joining either of the blocks to remain neutral in international politics. And that is called as non-alignment movement, NAM. In short, we call it as NAM. And this is our foreign policy. Non-alignment means not to join either of the blocks and to remain neutral in international politics. And this non-alignment movement became our foreign policy, India's foreign policy. And in 1950s, gradually, the world became a bipolar world since the world got divided into two power blocks. And these two superpowers, US and USSR, were trying to gain military supremacy, economic supremacy over each other. And it was a tense situation for the newly independent countries. And India did not want to join the Western Bloc because America was formed by the Europeans only when they established 13 colonies along the east coast and further fought for their independence. And India fought against these European powers, against the Britishers for more than 200 years to get independence. So there is no meaning if again India joins the Western Bloc. And India did not join the Eastern Bloc because most of our trade is with USA. And also we get loans from USA whenever needed. And if India joins the Eastern Bloc, USSR, America will stop its trade and its economic help also to India. So Jawaharlal Nehru, the then Prime Minister of India, he wanted to maintain equal distance from both the blocks and remain neutral without joining either of the blocks. And this is known as non-alignment movement. And it was pioneered by Jawaharlal Nehru. I'll stop it here and I'll continue in the next part.